Welcome to the TacMobility podcast. If you are a first responder and you've been one for some time, you've probably noticed some things are starting to change with your body. Whether this means that you're more tired than you used to be, or exhaustion is just kind of at every corner. Every time that you wake up, you're just you don't feel rested, or maybe recovery is becoming a lot harder to find. Maybe this is weight fluctuations when maybe your diet hasn't really changed. Maybe your testosterone and your estrogen levels are not what they used to be, or maybe you're curious about it. For a lot of first responders, their approach to these types of changes is to just pretend like nothing is happening and eventually it's going to go away. But what if there's a real problem that's going on? Today, we are talking about gut health, how night shift actually impacts your hormones, the kind of blood work that every first responder should be getting, and whether or not peptides are actually worth the hype. Today's guest is nurse practitioner Sarrah Lester. It is such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I first heard about the work that you're doing in the concierge medical practitioner space. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? So we've got, I don't know if she's a client of yours or just a mutual friend, but a good friend of mine, Kat, was like, you've got to check out this practice. I swear by it. And immediately looked you up and I was like, this is a breath of fresh air. And you primarily work with kind of like all populations, but you have a special heart for first responders. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. Because I spent most of my career in the emergency department. I still work in the ER, but I also have my concierge primary care. So just as I have a real soft spot for, fire, police, EMS, and everything that they go through, from seeing a lot of it in the ER. So I try to help out as much as I can and be accessible to those people as well.
Yeah, I forget about, I guess in my world, it's so focused on cops and firefighters that I sometimes forget about the stuff that ER nurses are seeing, which is wild. And also, rabbit trail here, a friend of mine, she was a nurse practitioner in an ER, and she was talking about kind of like the violence towards the people that work in the ER.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. And in some facilities, there's also a culture not to prosecute, which is, additive. You feel very expendable when the expectation is that a patient can assault you, and it's not anything that's going to be addressed, particularly legally, right? So that's not a good feeling, I think.
Okay, cool. So there's some PTSD in that world as well. Okay. Well, Sarah's been somebody that has prioritized her health for a really long time. I like seeing like the before and afters of like where you've taken your body, but you also talk about some kind of like controversial topics, which I cannot wait to get into it. So we're just going to jump right in. One thing that I've noticed with first responders that we interact with, whether that's social media or in the training room, is they're really good at like normalizing feeling bad. I feel like dog shit. Okay, it's fine. Let's just like keep going. Like no problem here. And I'm like, this is abnormal. This is like a very unique experience. And, what we commonly see is extreme exhaustion, or folks that are like living on caffeine and nicotine. Sleep is really awful. Chronic pain is something that's really prevalent.
Yep.
And even though they're really good at compartmentalizing some of the things, I wonder how many people are actually stopping to wonder like what's normal versus like what's worth asking about. So we might see it on the wellness side, but you have a unique perspective on the medical side. So like, what are some of the things that you see first responders just sort of brushing off as like, oh, this is just part of the job, versus these are actually things that we might really want to explore?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, right off the bat, the idea that compartmentalization is possible or normal, that's a really good example. Like, that's not a thing. So you're not going to be able to just compartmentalize You're not going to be able to just put it in a bucket of like, oh yeah, I saw this super traumatic, child SA case that I was just on and had to get all these really nasty details and then block that off, and it's not going to affect you the rest of the time. That's not a thing that happens. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest hindrances for first responders, particularly men, right? Because I don't want to talk about it because they just compartmentalize. But in order to truly tolerate that stress, first of all, you're never going to tolerate it. Like, that is not a normal human being. Unless you're a sociopath, you will never tolerate that well, right?
Continue.
Taking an active stance and processing that and not compartmentalizing, because you just you're just shoving it off to the side and it builds up in the background. It builds up and you're just resting tension. Whether or not you want to admit it, that's like a cognitive thing. But your body, like there's a book called like The Body Keeps Score. And that's a very accurate depiction of stress and how it affects the body. So you can think that you're compartmentalizing. You're not. And if you think that you're compartmentalizing, you're probably someone who needs to go talk to a therapist, talk to a trusted person, talk to a coach. You don't even have to medicalize it and call it therapy, because I don't necessarily like that either. A lot of people don't get help because of the notion that it's some diagnostic thing or something that requires a diagnosis. No, sometimes you just have to process what happened and come up with good behavioral coping skills to help work through that. So like, I think that, if you're carrying forward and you feel stressed, that's because you're a normal human being.
Yeah. There was a journal that I read that was talking about dehumanization of police officers from like an outside perspective and how that is adding to their stress. But then there was this covert perspective that like the personalized dehumanization that first responders have, where they think that they are superhuman, can actually hinder their health outcomes as well, thinking that like they're impervious to
Absolutely.
exactly what you just said.
Absolutely. I mean, and it was bad even before like the defund the police movement and all of that stuff, because the expectation is that if someone spits in your face, you don't react, right? That's already dehumanizing. That's already saying like you're going to tolerate something that no one else would ever tolerate. So you have to be able to operate in a way that is kind of non-human,
robotic.
You have to shut it off. You have to be able to tolerate with these really stressful situations, direct disrespect, really dangerous situations, without anyone acknowledging that you're still human. So like we see accidental things happening with the police where decisions are not made, perfect according to the public in the blink of an eye situation. Like that's not a realistic expectation a lot of the time. And I think that people forget that police officers, EMTs, firefighters, they're all still human beings. And that's very hard, I think, but before they even defund the police thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like just that pressure to perform and behave like a robot and not have any issues pop up. So you were talking about how that's kind of like the first thing that you notice within, the first responder population is their aptitude to compartmentalize or think that they can. So like when someone says that they're fine, and they've been working nights for like 15 years, what are some of the questions that you see somebody talk to you about, or maybe questions that like they might be like secretly Googling or talking to their friends about? Like, what are the things that are popping up for people that are working night shift?
It's just that whole, a lot of the time it's the head in the sand with the people who work night shift. For people who have like that sleep disruption, they're just like, this is a higher pay rate. Hello. That's why most people work night shift. When realistically, we know that working night shift, changing shifts in general, it's a carcinogen. Like it is classified as a carcinogen. So you're actively putting your health at risk to be able to make that little bit of extra money. And, maybe that's something that needs to change, or we put a little more pressure on agencies to cover that better. Because even though it's an occupational hazard, it's not something you're going to be covered for the rest of your life in some instances, right? Even, you work swing as a nurse, whatever. They're going to be like, yeah, okay, you had cancer in 20 years. Who cares? But recognizing those as like occupational hazards and part of working night shift yourself is important. But a lot of the time, some questions that I'll ask, because they'll think, oh yeah, I compartmentalize fine. Yeah, I'm getting enough sleep. And I'm like, oh, okay, how much do you drink? How much alcohol do you drink? And then it's, well, a few a day, or it's, oh yeah, I just, have like, 8 or 9 on Friday and Saturday,
Yeah.
And when you talk to those people, it's so funny because it's like the normalized deviance, right? Because it's so common in those circles that when you talk to them and you're like, do you know that that's like not normal for like non-first responders? And they're like, oh.
Dude, I mean, it's so true. I remember going on a ride along and I like came home at night and it was, you know, the middle of the night and I'm thinking, I'm like, I have to get to bed, but I'm like spun up. And I was like, oh, this is why there might be this like, you know, this desire to drink and kind of like speed up that like natural slowing down process. Yep. Yeah. So I don't know if you know this or not, but this month, this is our 4th annual Undrunkest August. And it's a month-long sober challenge that we do because it is so normalized and it is such a big part of the experience for a lot of first responders, to the point that when, you know, wellness is all fun and games until you talk to somebody about alcohol dependence.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like, oh, no, yeah, I have something. I've got this thing that's going on. And I'm like, so then just skip that one day. And it's almost like, I don't know if it's like some people feel like this is, you know, authority and they're being told what to do. But at the end of the day, you know, one thing that we teach in our classes is we're not here to judge what your coping skills are, but are you willing to take an honest look at the result or the outcome of where your body will be once you do use that coping skill?
Right.
So it might short term make you feel good.
Oh, yeah.
But then what's the long-term outcome? What's the tomorrow outcome or the end of the week outcome? Okay. So you're seeing that a lot in your practice, and that's
absolutely.
like a thing to ask.
Yeah, definitely asking about alcohol use. And a lot of time it is that. It's just they need to wind down. You know, another one that's a little bit more like sneaky is that they think that waking up all the time when you're sleeping is normal. It's another thing that's really common in first responders. They think, oh, yeah, you ask how they sleep. Oh, yeah, I sleep pretty good. And you're like, okay, like no waking up. Well, yeah, I wake up in the middle of the night. Like, how many times? You know, and they're like, you know, 3, 4, not bad though. Like, and to them, that's normal. Because again, when your sleep rhythm gets off, in particular, like the consistency is really the big one. Day shift, night shift is also not great, but the consistency is super important. And if you're waking up all the time, like you're not getting proper sleep.
Right.
And alcohol negatively impacts restorative sleep. So when your sleep is already kind of a hot commodity, if you're using alcohol to wind down and then go to sleep,
right,
this hot commodity is now like even more restricted because it's going to have to be a period where you're not drinking, right, to really get that restorative sleep. So,
yeah. And that's congruent with what we see in the classrooms when we're doing our burnout recovery trainings. We talk to them about how poor sleep is something that drains your energy and that can be contributing to how you wake up feeling that exhaustion, that constant exhaustion. And more than not, most people are getting between 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night. And I ask how many people are getting over 8, and it's usually 1, 2, maybe 3 people in a classroom full of 50. And when I tell them like, you should be prioritizing getting 8 hours, and they're like, they laugh at it. And I'm like, well, is it the 8 hours that's off here? Or is it maybe the perspective that you don't need 8 hours is off?
It's almost like, well, that's like a badge of honor, right? Like I'm here after working last night and I'm here and I've only got 3 hours of sleep. Like it's a badge of honor in the first responder community to be able to just like grind, you know? So
that's really true. And I think that covers kind of like all types of first responders. High achieving, high driving individuals that are going to get it done no matter what, even if their body is the thing that takes the biggest hit, people are just willing to do it. So what are some of the symptoms that you would say are like some of the most common things that you see amongst, okay, so we talked about alcohol use and sleep deprivation. What are some other symptoms that are kind of more common?
You know, relationship issues, obviously emotional regulation is a huge one, being able to really control yourself when you're like angry or upset, and to also resolve conflict without being avoidant. So, because that's part of it too, is that a lot of them are like, I do deal with conflict all the time at work. So like I encounter conflict outside of work and I'm all, fuck you, and I walk away. So like that's kind of a common thing too. And that's not really constructive for relationships. And being aware of that. And then, you know, symptoms of all of it put together, most common ones, obviously fatigue, brain fog. It's so funny. People will say, you know, I'm fatigued. It's my testosterone. It's this, it's that. And it's like, but you're sleeping 4 hours a night. That's
I don't know why I'm tired.
That's the
I can't put my finger on it.
You can't charge people hourly for sleep though. So no one ever brings up that part. You know, you don't make money by telling people to sleep more.
That's hilarious. That's so true.
I will say on the sleep thing, shameless plug. I'm not a grifter. I do not like recommending things. I have no affiliate links, but the Aura rings are really, really good for keeping you accountable to sleep because they track how much you slept. They keep track of your sleep debt. And if you look at it and you're like, I want to go out with my friends, and then you look at your sleep debt and you're like, I have 6 hours of sleep debt. Maybe I should go to sleep tonight.
Yeah.
So it does kind of give you a measurable, objective way to know where you're at instead of just being like, I'm fine. So I do like those.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing about data, right? Is it's really easy to be like, oh, I think this, or I feel this, or I can ignore this. But when you're looking at numbers in front of you and you're seeing a line graph, it's hard to dispute that type of thing. I think with a lot of first responders, especially cops, I think it can be really isolating when you are sort of starting to recognize symptoms that are popping up, because I'm in a relationship with a first responder and my entire world revolves around working with first responders. And we hear enough to know that even if people aren't sort of facing these challenges head on, they're still experiencing things. Things are sort of popping up in their world that make them curious or concerned or whatever that might be. I think there's also this other side of that, which is the amount of emotional capacity or time that they have to actually deal with the thing is much smaller, I think, than the average person. Shift work it takes up so much of a person's life. So like, that it's important to talk about this stuff. And I think with TacMobility, we really want to help people by talking about these things as a community. So from your perspective, like what's one consequence of being a first responder or being a cop that's like just not talked about nearly enough?
Oh gosh, there's just so many. I mean, it's the cancer rates are higher, particularly for fire. Cardiovascular rates are like heart attack rates are way higher. The number one killer of on-duty death is
Suicide.
Heart attack during active duty.
Yeah,
when you're actively working your shift, that's the number one cause of death in police and fire is having a major heart attack because it's like cumulative stress and then a high adrenaline situation. And that's sad, because a lot of the time these people are so focused on helping others that they really just let everything with themselves go to the wayside.
That's an interesting perspective because on the line of duty death side, when we talk about statistics and we talk about the health of first responders, specifically, we work with cops, we see that suicide is the number one cop killer in America. So you talking about the cardiovascular risk, is this something, I just don't hear this being talked about. I do hear it on the fire side. I'm not hearing this on the police side very commonly. Is that?
It's worse for fire, theoretically, because of the gear that they carry and because of the exertion. While they're like, that's why they die of heart attacks more on shift. But it's still disproportionately high in police, likely because of stress and the shift work type stuff. And it is definitely not talked about a lot because it's kind of boring. Right? It's heart disease, but it affects the most people, but it's boring. Like, oh yeah.
You like think of it as like an old person. Like, oh, It's like this happens to like 70-year-olds.
Right, that's not exciting. That's not, but they die prematurely of heart disease. They have plenty of years that they could have these good, functional, awesome lives. But they retire and sometimes they retire and just sometimes on shift, they're responding to a call and they have a massive heart attack because they've been neglecting their own health and because stress is cumulative,
So that kind of brings me to think about that there's so much pressure to be a fit cop and there's so many pages about it. And I think that there's like this misconception that if you're fit, you're not susceptible or you're not at risk for some of these diseases or cardiovascular issues. Is that correct? Like if you're fit and you're in shape, then you're like good to go?
Well, it's very nuanced, right? So if people are not monitoring what's going on inside their body, inflammatory levels, cholesterol levels, a big one that everybody wants to ignore too, because it's not super exciting, is blood pressure. Everybody's so worried about what labs they're going to get, but they're not taking their blood pressure at home because when we take a blood pressure in the office, we can't treat you based on that blood pressure. So a lot of the time they won't even mention it if you're borderline hypertensive.
Talk about this, because this is something that, we spoke about this on the phone and you like went off, bro. You were like, this is bullshit. So like go off, sister. Like tell me, what are you seeing?
Well, we will not diagnose hypertension based off of a one-time office visit, because that is probably a high blood pressure just because you're in an office and you're walking around. The way that you properly take a blood pressure is you sit at a table with your arms supported in front of you, 5 minutes uninterrupted, not on your phone, before you take your blood pressure. And then you take your blood pressure at home twice a day. That is the gold standard. And that is how we accurately identify and treat hypertension. But we see people, they don't want to mention the high blood pressure that they're seeing in office, because we tell the patient and then the patient doesn't send us readings or doesn't take their blood pressure at home, and it gets missed, and that's like one of the biggest things that is absolutely silent. There is nothing in your labs that will tell you that your blood pressure is high until you have kidney disease. And at that point, you can't fix it. So high blood pressure is probably the number one risk factor for stroke and heart attack, possibly above cholesterol. I would have to look at the statistics on that. Very close though. And in high stress occupations, you are way more prone to hypertension because you have a higher resting tone.
Yes.
That means your diastolic number will always be higher. People with PTSD, they will have higher diastolic numbers, and that is the worst kind of hypertension.
So in our classes, we teach officers how to practice breath work as a way of controlling their heart rate variability. And so often in 2026, with the amount of information that is available and the videos and the content, there are still so many people that are not sold on breath work and the positive impacts that it can have on your cardiovascular health and just your overall stress in general. Now, I'm not saying that it is going to cure everything, but like, what is your perspective on like the power of breath work in this type of population?
It's amazing. It is a very high yield, low effort thing that you can do. You can practice it at home. You can practice it while you're at a stoplight. You can practice it while you're sitting doing nothing. And those little blips of vagal stimulation with like a physiologic sigh, Huberman goes over that on a really good YouTube video. That does help your resting heart rate. It does help your vagal tone, and it does help your blood pressure. So if you're doing that throughout the day, you're able to bring that overall tone down. And I think that there is something, again, I don't know if there's any research on this, so I'm just kind of off the hip here, but I would say that if you teach your body how to like come down with breath work, you almost get like a Pavlovian thing where you start thinking about breath work and then your body's already ready to respond because it's receptive to that. You're kind of forcing it with like a physiologic sigh or box breathing. And then eventually when you think about deep breathing, you probably get a little bit of a response and still better response even with active breathing.
That what you're describing is that bottom to top regulation that we learn in teacher training for yoga certifications for somatic practices, but that is disrupting that like mind body kind of loop that we go into where your brain is perceiving stress, or you've been practicing hypervigilance and your body kind of responds to what your brain is thinking, and then you're in this constant communication of like stress, like kind of hijacking that process with breath work or even just relaxing your shoulders down. Those things do send signals to your brain that like, okay, we're doing something different here. We don't have to be stressing out. Okay. So you brought up the physiological side, which that is our number one
That's
technique.
my favorite one.
Okay, this is the number one technique that we teach to cops because we're like, it's so accessible. It's the fastest, freest way for you to control what's happening in your body. So let's do it with them. Should we do like 3 rounds of it? Yeah. Okay, so for those of you that don't know about the physiological side, it's a double inhale, short breath hold at the top, and then a slow exhale through the mouth. Okay, let's do it.
Ready? Okay. feels so nice.
It's so crazy how
only doing 2, but I'm like, ooh,
my body like completely I'm like, oh,
you can
okay,
feel it.
I can release my shoulders down from my ears. When we were talking about high blood pressure, you had mentioned that it's a frustration of yours in the medical field when there are companies that are servicing first responders and are checking their blood pressure on shift.
that one's actually testosterone.
Oh, that was the testosterone.
That was the testosterone.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
That one will send me straight through the roof.
Okay, we're gonna let's just get into it because this is gonna make a lot of people upset, especially some of the guys. So buckle the fuck up.
Yeah,
okay,
all right.
All right. So my husband lateraled to Arizona, and when you're the fucking new guy, you're working night shift. So it's something you had said earlier about people choosing night shift. Like there is that, but then there's also seniority based shift work. And when he moved to nights, I mean, he came home every week talking about how the guys are talking about testosterone and he needs to get checked now and everybody's on it. And now we're hearing more about testosterone for women. And like, this is like the hot topic. Like everybody's literally obsessed with this being like so the magical kind of thing. So before we get into like your very hot take on testosterone, like what does working like some of those like rotating shifts or even those night shifts, like how are those actually impacting your hormones?
Substantially. So does chronic stress. That's part of the problem is everybody wants to talk about root cause, right? A lot of these hormone people, the root cause, you need to fix your hormones. That's the root cause. No, your hormones are influenced by your sleep, your stress, your diet. So if you are 25 and you are not overweight, and you are working night shift and you are not sleeping well and your testosterone is 250, that is to be expected. If you are not taking care of yourself, you have to take care of yourself. It's not optional. Your body does not want to reproduce when it thinks that there are threats everywhere, right? So that's the evolutionary perspective of it. And same kind of thing happens with women. With women with a lot of stress, they'll start getting irregular periods, irregular ovulation. That's part of stress. If you're constantly in fight or flight, your body sends less signals for hormone regulation.
I think that is not talked about as common. I know that that's not talked about as commonly because you're totally right in terms of like, you know, your hierarchy of needs. Procreation is not at the bottom when it comes to staying alive. And also those are symptoms which, like you're saying, they should exist. That's one thing that we talk about a lot in our trainings is like the symptoms aren't the problem. Those should exist. Those are indicators or alarms in your body saying, hey, there's something going on. So if they are, so then question if they're going like, oh my God, my testosterone is totally low. I've got to get on T. Are they then sort of like making the problem invisible because they're treating this symptom and they're not actually dealing with the thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are absolutely covering up it's a Band-Aid, right? Anybody is going to feel better, at least short term, with adding testosterone. The vast majority of the population, male or female, will have improved energy, improved libido, improved muscle mass, improved all these wonderful things until they don't. I get a lot of people coming off of testosterone because they kept increasing the level because it's almost something that people seem to acclimate to and they want to get higher and higher doses. I keep seeing this consistently. Then they ride at a high level for a long time. And when you withdraw or taper testosterone on those people, they feel like dog shit. They are
what
anxious,
happens?
They are lashing out at people. They have no emotional regulation whatsoever. They will drop of a hat, got to get away from people. They get so agitated, male and female. Men are worse, to be honest. Women, generally, it's more fatigue, more just loss of libido, more vaguey stuff. But men get the real emotional stuff when they have testosterone withdrawn. Another problem with using testosterone to mask the root cause of your own low testosterone, which I'm not saying this is the case for everybody. Some people are truly hypogonadal. They truly need testosterone replacement. That's absolutely a thing. I do testosterone optimization in my practice.
I was going to say, yeah, you walk people through like the safe
these are
ways.
your risks. These are your benefits. And I would rather you do that with someone who's going to also be monitoring your cholesterol levels, your blood pressure, your estrogen levels appropriately, because they overblock estrogen, which is a whole nother thing. Which increases your cardiovascular risk, right? Because estrogen is a protective hormone. So they put them all on estrogen blockers, and it's just not going to be good. In 10 years, it's not going to be good. I like people to make their own decisions, and I do my best to do it safely and within the confines of what I'm legally allowed to do and professionally allowed to do. So testosterone optimization, keeping people at this, 900, 1,000 even, that's too high.
Yeah.
That is too high. All of the American and European urology guidelines call for 300 to 500. And then this is going to blow your mind. So in all of these guidelines for the treatment of low testosterone in men, when we are replacing, and they've had too low levels at 250 or lower morning values, because that's your lowest value or your highest value of the day is first thing in the morning. So you have to have 2 below 250 before 8 a.m. They want you at like 6 a.m. No one's going to do that. Anyways, when you replace their testosterone to 300 to 500, you increase their risk of atrial fibrillation by anywhere from 3 to 5-fold, which atrial fibrillation is an irregular heartbeat that can send clots to the brain and cause a stroke. You increase your risk of pulmonary embolism by about 3 to 6-fold. That's not small, right? You're increasing the risk of kidney disease. All of these things come with going from truly low to physiologic low end of normal.
I mean, I think that if more, well, one, I guess it starts with people taking their cardiovascular health seriously in the first responder world. So let's say they do that. I think that knowing that information would completely balance maybe some of those decision-making, some of those choices when it comes to whether or not they want to use it. And I think you're totally right about testosterone is, it's a drug.
It is.
Your body, if you can get 900 with something, why would your body then produce?
Well, it shuts off production.
Yeah. And I think that that's so important to talk about is the same, so many cops work with people on the streets that are addicted to substances and have all kinds of opinions about what that looks like without actually looking at that concept in general, where that also applies to testosterone and peptides and all these other things that we're putting in our body. If it's going to take you outside of a normal level, to your point, you're going to feel great. But then what happens? Are you now going to be on that forever?
Right. Yeah, so if men are on it for a long period of time, they can get testicular atrophy, and sometimes it never fully rebounds. It's their testicles get smaller. They shrink because they're not being used.
That sucks.
It does suck. So if you take it really young, super bad idea to use testosterone young.
I'm sharing this with my son because
super bad idea.
The thing with the teenage boys right now is
bad,
everything on their news feeds or on their phones is guys that are freaking jacked and they're the science bros are dude.
Right, and ignoring the fact that bodybuilders, the average life expectancy is 42 for men. So that's on that whole fit thing. That's what I was going to mention then too. I just forgot, is that bodybuilders have a substantially shorter life expectancy. And it's largely because of performance enhancing drugs. It's actually a special niche population of mine as well, is getting people off of them because it's not to your benefit. It's not going to be good for you. But more on the testosterone avenue, taking it when you're young is worse. At some point, you might need it as you get older to feel better. Is there research showing that that's beneficial? Yes, there's research showing that it improves insulin sensitivity and all this stuff, and it kind of levels out those risks. But the problem is that people are misrepresenting data, like the Traverse trial. They say, look, it showed no increased risk of cardiovascular events. Well, go read the actual study because it clearly shows an increase in kidney disease, atrial fibrillation, and pulmonary embolism. So
so you're talking about that stuff that is apparent in some of the studies that are being done. What types of information and research do you think is going to emerge?
That it is much higher risk to have a borderline low, a 300, a 400, and be replaced at 900 or 1,000. That will be much higher risk. because that's how everything in medicine works. If you do minimum effective dose, you generally have less side effects, less long-term risk. The longer dose, longer duration is generally associated with more risk. So if you didn't need it to begin with, your risk is probably higher.
It's not it's not preventative. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not preventative. We are not. And that's like, and it just, you got to be really careful with it, right? And that's why I think it has to be part of a conversation. Most people, when I talk to them and I explain the risks, most of them do not want to continue having a testosterone level over 1,000. I'd say half of the men I talk to will eventually slowly work their way back down to a normal level.
That's really great. Okay, so we kind of talked a little bit about peptides because, I mean, I think that it's a popular topic right now, and especially in the first responder world, like anything that you can do to kind of like give you an edge up, especially when sleep is shitty, especially when recovery is harder, or especially when there are so many changes that are happening, like aging more rapidly than the average person. I think a lot of people are turning towards peptides, but one thing that we're not really talking about is how we don't know a ton about peptides. I'm definitely on I'm pro peptides. I haven't taken them, but I'm like, hey, I think that's great. I saw this video where someone was saying, it's so funny how many people are anti-vaccination, but are pro peptide and have no idea what's in this. But we have so many negative things about vaccinations. I was like, also me. Yes. That is such an interesting mirror that you just held up. So like, are peptides really helping people, or is this kind of the same?
So because there are people out there that are going to try to, use semantics to be like, oh, peptides are great. Look at GLPs. Correct. Look at GLPs. Look at octreotide, which we use for upper GI bleeds and esophageal varices. There are peptides, insulin, that are good and necessary. But to pretend that every peptide is all upsides and no downsides is insane. Like that is quite literally insane to believe that you're going to take any kind of medication that alters your physiology in any way, and there is absolutely no downside is crazy. That is crazy. Even fish oil. I love fish oil. I think everybody should take fish oil. But it does make you a little bit more prone to bleeding. That's a downside, right? Everything has a downside.
Even ashwagandha. There's
liver
research
failure.
around ashwagandha. Like it's
And that's why even that kind of stuff, people go to naturopaths, they put them on, some sort of cortisol thing indefinitely. That's not helpful. Even all of that stuff, ashwagandha, herbs, supplements need to be used as like a pharmaceutical as a short term. This is our ultimate goal. This is why we're taking it. And when that's complete, we stop taking it. Peptides in particular, the studies are misrepresented. BPC is a really good example of that. So this idea,
that's a popular one.
I hate it. There's this idea that you can inject BPC somewhere, anywhere in your body, and it's just going to magically heal something with no downsides. Okay.
I bought
crazy.
into it.
The only evidence supporting the use of BPC is oral BPC for inflammatory bowel conditions. I will say that does seem to be a very promising avenue, and I have used it in some of my patients with like gastritis that wouldn't get better, and it did seem to really help them in addition to my usual like gut healing protocol. So I will say that there is evidence to that, and I've experienced that. And BPC, people have their stories, but anecdote doesn't mean anything. And a placebo effect essentially accounts for like roughly 50% of efficacy in double-blind randomized controlled trials. Placebo effect is like 50% of your effect. So when you have the social, I think it's like 46. But when you have all of the social priming of like BPC is great, BPC is great, BPC is great.
Right.
Now your placebo effect is like amplified, right?
Yeah.
So we have social pressure to be like, well, you're gonna be the one asshole who said it sucked, right? So there's all of this other stuff that goes into it. And ultimately, most of the healing peptides, your BPC 157, your CJC, your TB 500 or TB4, they are upregulating things that can grow cancer. So that is their proposed mechanism of action, is upregulating IGF-1, upregulating VEGF, upregulating these things that we know can grow cancer, to the point where that is sometimes a treatment for cancer, is to block VEGF. So
where are the warning labels on this?
That's the only reason that the FDA just approved all those peptides in that recent meeting. They did not approve them. They approved them to be able to be compounded because of that. Because in that circumstance, now people should have to go to a provider, which they should be telling them the risks and benefits so that they can get the peptide if they want to.
Right.
That was to address the illicit online Chinese peptide sales, because those are fake COAs. Usually the third-party testing is all forged. There is no one to hold accountable. They're offshore companies. It's very dangerous. They've tested some of those. Like, some American people have gone and tested like what's in them. Sometimes it has high levels of testosterone. Sometimes it has HGH.
Oh, so you're gonna feel great.
Oh yeah, exactly. You're gonna notice that you're getting hypertrophy.
Oh my
it's because
God.
it's not BPC. It's because it's HGH.
That's so dangerous.
Plus the cadmium, lead, and all the other heavy metals that they found in it, which obviously builds up over time and doesn't secrete very well, so that can become a problem. There are a million reasons to not do peptides. And the only time that you should really even consider doing peptides is if you have dialed in and exhausted every other evidence-based option first.
Well, we know that that's probably not happening very often, but you did bring up one way that you find it helpful, which was talking about gut health. This is, I think, it rightfully so, becoming a more talked about topic. And I think that it's really important from the lens that I have. I remember working with this, it was a sergeant in an academy, and he was talking about his IBS. And we hear a lot of digestive issues, which we talk about, the connection to stress and hormone release and all the things. But he would say, he was like, every time that I'm getting an email from my boss or one walks in the room, my guts are just like water, which, if you're in gear and you're on duty, that is got to be a very uncomfortable experience, very inconvenient. So when it comes to like IBS or other digestive issues, like, why is that so common in first responder populations?
Great question. That's kind of like a chicken or the egg type thing. It's probably a little bit of stress compounding something that you naturally were predisposed to. A lot of your microbiota is determined actually at birth. So there are differences in, the GI bacteria in people who are born via C-section versus vaginal delivery, because all of that bacterial load is just there. And everybody's bacterial flora is like specific to them, their diet, and their stress. And stress in particular, we know probably negatively impacts the microbiome. And then you end up, again, negative feedback loop, right? Where you get more stress, more inflammation, you get a little bit more leaky gut, a little bit more intestinal permeability, which then can also cause more stress. So again, with like prioritizing things, right? Like, your body does not digest food properly when you are stressed. And first responders are always stressed.
Yeah.
First responders are also always eating out of windows.
I was going to say, and compound that with like disordered eating,
Yeah.
right. Or just not super healthy or saturated foods, saturated fats.
That's generally like the only thing that shows consistent long-term improvement in gut health is not supplements. It's not a cleanse. It's not any of that. It is consistent, good diet, high fiber. My carnivore people and keto people are gonna die about that. But
so my ex-husband, he was having, he would have major like gastrointestinal issues, and he was on omeprazole for like years, which is for ulcers. Side effect creates ulcers.
Yeah.
And we were on a cruise one time, and this guy was talking to us about how they went vegan, and he got off all kinds of medications. And so we were like, let's just try it. It's a very hard diet to keep up with, but we were on it for about 3 to 4 months, and he was able to stop taking that medication. And it was mind blowing. It felt like magical witchcraft kind of shit, where we were just like, what?
Yep. And you don't have to go that hard. You don't have to go full vegan.
Yeah.
I mean, in gastritis, acid reflux in particular, and the long-term use of PPIs like omeprazole, Nexium, all that, very bad idea. Like, that is a very, very bad idea. You want to address the root cause of your acid reflux and change things that you can change without adding in a PPI. And number one is diet, avoiding triggering things, which is going to be different for everybody. But in general, high fiber, less processed foods, fewer processed foods, and making sure that you're having adequate hydration.
Yeah.
And avoiding things that are, animal fats seem to make it worse in a lot of people. Some people, I will say, I say that with like a little reservation because I know that's what the data says, but I have had a couple of patients who did have improvement. So that was when they went like carnivore. That does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
But
That's
there
a pretty
are always
intense.
exceptions
I feel
to
like
everything.
that's just as intense as going vegan.
For
like
sure.
it is.
And all of the trends teach you the same stuff, right? Which is like, come by my program. This is why you should do this. And ultimately, the answer is always in the middle. It's moderation. It's we know what we should be eating. You know that some fresh fruit, vegetables, and chicken is better for you than McDonald's.
So since you are so passionate about gut health, obviously you're going to have that in the back of your mind when you're interacting with some of your patients. So what are some of the things that people talk about in terms of symptoms where you go, actually, that could be traced to having a leaky gut or having some kind of like gut issue? Like, are there things that trigger your mind to like explore that with your patients?
Not particularly, with the exception of like some vitamin deficiencies. So if I see that you're like chronically deficient in like ferritin, iron, vitamin D, folate, B12, if I see that, then I'm thinking like, okay, there's something GI related going on. Other than that, it's the basic GI stuff, right? Like IBS symptoms, constipation symptoms. Acid reflux is a huge one that everybody's just like, here's a PPI, move on with your life. But that is an indicator of a much bigger problem, and you're going to create bigger problems with adding that PPI, like osteoporosis and stuff.
We got a lot of folks on Tums in the first responder world where their guts are just not happy.
Intake of calcium is very bad for cardiovascular health.
Oh, cool.
Fun fact. Yep. So calcium supplementation.
Fun fact.
Yep. Not so fun fact. Calcium is pretty heavily associated with worsening arteriosclerosis. So.
Okay. So before we get into Sarrah and I, we are working together on a really fun project. But before we get into that, I want to talk about your practice a little bit, because it's an uncommon concept, concierge medicine. I was just telling you that I just recently took my kids off of health insurance, and you were like, maybe don't do it all the way. But, I think for a lot of people that look at modern medicine, the idea of getting off of insurance or using a concierge medical service can be like, it's not responsible, or it's not effective, or you need to have whatever. I'm sure you hear lots of things. Like, what do you love so much about that idea, like in that whole process?
So I actually accidentally went into concierge medicine. Initially, I was going to take insurance because I just wanted to like be there and help everyone. And I just wanted to change primary care, because you walk in, you're seen for 5 minutes. They're like, here's your PPI for your acid reflux, because they have on average 6 minutes to spend with you. You cannot properly assess someone in that amount of time. It's difficult for me to properly assess healthy people in under 45 minutes, because you have to go over everything, their family history, their lifestyle factors, all of the stuff that can be contributing to their health. And I did not realize how hard that would be through an insurance model. So I ended up quickly after I started, talking to insurance companies and seeing reimbursement rates, which, by the way, was like $60 for a 30-minute appointment, minus, denials, minus delays, minus, transaction fees to pay you, and, having to submit billing and a 6-month delay on payment. I was like, that's just not feasible for the level of care that I want to provide. So I switched to doing cash pay only so I could spend more time with people. And then I kept encountering situations where patients, I would want them to come in and they would be like, well, how much is it going to be? Because they would like talk themselves out of needing to be seen because it cost extra money. So, which bothered me more for them, because I'm like, well, but you're concerned, so you should come see me. So as much as I didn't want to, when I initially started my practice, I did not want to do a membership, because I was like, we are all being membershiped to death.
That's so true, dude.
Awful. It is terrible.
The subscriptions
oh
are
my gosh, it's
out of control.
It's so bad. So I was like, I don't want to do that. But then I realized, like, this is probably one of the few environments where it does make sense, because now I have patients and they want to come see me. They just come see me because they already paid their $100 or $200 a month. Like, that's included in what they pay. And it also makes it so that I'm able to like leave space open, because part of providing really good care and being able to have good pattern recognition is being able to be there for patients for things that they would normally go to urgent care for. Because sometimes you can use your knowledge of that person to see something and be like a normal urgent care complaint and put pieces together and be like, oh, no, this isn't that.
So you're building a
relationship.
relationship with, I couldn't tell you the name of the last GP that I saw, like, or my kid's GP. Like, they're different every time. And to your point, it is a 5-minute, and then we get charged more if it's longer than like 10 minutes. And we're like,
or if you have more than one problem.
right.
Yep.
And I called one time, I was like, what is this? And they're like, well, you came in for this. And I was like, bitch, we have your attention. Like, can you not?
And how are you supposed to know like what's one issue versus another issue? That's not I have a hard time telling sometimes when things are connected when I'm talking to patients. How are they supposed to know? It's just not a realistic expectation. So I think, you know, on that same vein with regard to health insurance, like I told you, you know, my experience predominantly in emergency medicine is that you got to have something in case of a catastrophic event because you do not want your care delayed because you don't have insurance. But for most other things, just do cash pay. Like, people don't realize this, but you can get a cash pay MRI for like $300 to $400.
That's what I was just telling my partner. I was like, back in the day, they used to be like $1,500. Like, there are so many like advances and like cash pay situations where it's like, it's $95 to get stitches done. Cool. Moving along. Versus like, okay, and now you have to come back and it's another, and you're like, oh my God. And you're just like, yeah. And I think that I was a single mom for a really long time. And so I'm calculating and I'm thinking about like, how much is this going to cost versus like, can I afford to just like ignore this thing that's going on? I think with a lot of first responders, like there is, you know, going back to the privilege of time, it is really tough to get in and get things taken care of. But it seems like you make your practice really accessible to people. And I love the idea of longer appointments. I mean, to be able to go in, if you're finally taking the time out of your schedule or you're pulling your head out of the sand and facing something, to know that you're not going to just be shuffled in and shuffled out very quickly. I can imagine that just right off the bat just sort of helps your nervous system kind of just settle down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And they get the time that they need. So in the same kind of vein is that if I have a patient who wants to be seen quickly because they have to work, they just be a phone call. You know, if you think you have a UTI, you tell me about your UTI symptoms. We go over some red flag stuff. You know, everything sounds okay. We can do that over the phone. That's fine.
Why is that not It is mind-blowing to me. Conjunctivitis, mind-blowing to me. How many things require the eyes of a practitioner for 3 minutes, but the process and the amount of money that goes into it. Yeah.
It's because you can't bill for it.
I really love that you are kind of changing the way that model looks for people. And I think that that's really refreshing. Okay. We have to tell you about this new campaign we're partnering on with each other. Okay. So obviously we've been listening to her perspective and you know, her passion towards the first responder world and just sort of approaching your health, you know, not being afraid of things. And one of the ways that you can check to see what's going on is to take a peek under the hood, see what's going on in the bod. So Sarrah and I we're collaborating together for the month of September. It's called Know Your Risk. And this is a blood panel campaign where we are encouraging first responders to go to your doctor, go to the lab, get some stuff done. Okay. So tell me a little bit about like why this can be really impactful for the first responder world and like why it's actually not a good idea to pretend like nothing's happening. Because
you can't catch stuff early. That's really the biggest one. You don't have a baseline. So, you know, if I check someone's kidney function and it's a little borderline, I don't know if it's been like that for 20 years or 2 days. If you don't have recent labs, you don't have something to show us and sometimes trends are more important than like an absolute number. And a lot of those online places like Function Health and stuff, like they're great. I love that they're making things more accessible for people, but sometimes they don't draw the correct type of lab. And sometimes it's reported in a different number than what you would get from a lab that's local. So I always tell everybody, make sure, even if you're well, even if you're totally perfectly fine, get your annual exam. I know it sounds absolutely stupid and like a waste of time, and it's hard to carve out, you know, for regular primary care, 2 hours, right? Because I'm be running 30 minutes behind. It's hard to carve out that time, but it is so important to do that. I've had patients catch, Graves' disease, lymphoma, leukemia. I've had patients catch congenital, like familial high cholesterol. That's another one. You know, their LDL was 250. Yeah. And so this is someone who's been walking around with a LDL of 250 for most of their life, and they're young and they just didn't know. So making sure that you're just checking up on the really basic stuff, and then taking your blood pressure. That would be another really big one. Okay. Particularly with the overuse of electrolyte supplements. Recommended daily sodium is, not a lot.
So everybody that's taking 4 elements a day,
stop it.
You're not supposed to consume 4,000 milligrams of sodium a day.
No, you are
Get
not.
your coconut water, okay? You got to stop.
And even when we control for blood pressure in those people, even if you don't have the type of blood pressure that responds to sodium, because that's how they used to say that would increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. That was a connection with sodium and cardiovascular disease. Now we realize even if you control for blood pressure, still an increase. And it has to do with sodium at too high of levels is inherently inflammatory. So I go to the gym sometimes for 3.5 hours, and average heart rate's 135. And I go to the sauna for 20 to 30 minutes, and I have never taken an electrolyte supplement in my life. And I used to work outside training horses for 8 hours at a time. Didn't need any electrolytes. So unless you are a marathon runner in 100-degree temperatures, like you probably don't need the electrolytes.
We've been sold again, you guys. Yeah. So for the month of September, we're going to be right there with you. Get your blood work done. Sarah's going to teach you guys how to take your blood pressure at home as a way of just getting ahead of things. In your world as a first responder, reports, a paper trail, all of those things are super important to you because you know about the liability that is associated without having those things. And that's essentially what we're saying is blood work and these things, that's your paper trail. This is going to give, the more you know. Okay. The more you know.
Yep. And cancer screening. Don't forget about getting your butthole checked.
That's important. Okay. So thank you so much for your time today. If there's one last thing that you could leave for the first responder world, like what would be some advice or words of encouragement that you have for them?
You've got one body and one mind, and you better take care of them.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.